going to need your chemistry reference tables out for this activity. You're going to open those up basically to the back page, and we're going to look at this column right here talking about polyatomic ions. Now, poly means many, so these are many atom ions, and it's basically a charged molecule. And these charged molecules do have certain properties, and add those to the compounds that they form. So they're going to participate in ionic bonding and be attracted to ions of opposite charge. There are certain things in chemistry that we just have to memorize, and these are some of them. Now, this list right here is not all of the polyatomic ions that are in existence. There are many, many others, but once you get a handle on the most common ones, you start to recognize a polyatomic ion for what it is. And if you didn't know it or didn't recognize it, you would know to look it up. We're not going to memorize all of these on here. I've picked out the most common, 18, and I did add one here at the bottom. So you can go ahead and write that down right there. That is one we're going to have to memorize. So I want you to mark these or highlight them like I'm going to do so that you'll know which ones you have to memorize, but the others will be available if you need to look them up. So we're going to start here with ammonium. This one is one that you need to memorize. And I'll go back down to this other one right here that I wrote in hydronium. Now, these two are the only two positive ones on the list, and they both end in So that can help with some of your memorization. Those are the only two positive, and they end in So ammonium and hydronium. Now for hydronium, for the time being, I'll accept either H plus or H3O plus, but there will come a time when you have to know the difference between the two, and we'll talk about that when that time comes. The next one I want you to memorize is acetate. Now, acetate could be written this way, or it could be written this way, and we'll talk about the differences as to why. Most inorganic chemists write it this way, organic chemists write it this way, because it tells us a little bit about the structure. You can memorize it one way or another, but you must be able to recognize both. And this is called acetate. We have a lot that deal with chlorine. Now you'll notice that we've got a chlorine in here that is an L, not an I. I promise if I want something to be an I will make it an intentional capital letter I. So this is perchlorate, chlorate, chlorite, and hypochlorite. Those are ones you're going to have to remember. And if you look back at these four, they have very similar things. All of them have a chlorine, all of them have an oxygen, at least one, and all of them have a negative charge. So that can help you out a little bit. So all the chlors do deal with that. The difference is the number of oxygens. So perchlorate has 4. Chlorate has 3 oxygens, chlorite has 2 oxygen, and hypochlorite only has 1 oxygen. Alright, next one is permanganate. This is a beautiful purple compound, especially when combined with potassium. We'll look at that when I return. Then we've got nitrate, nitrite. You may have heard about nitrates before in lunch meat and things like that. If you have a saltwater fish tank, you have to watch for your nitrate levels in there. Otherwise, your fish will not be doing so well. Hydroxide is here. It's got hydrogen and oxygen like the name implies. Notice nitrate has nitrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen carbonate is the next one you need to memorize. Now, hydrogen carbonate has hydrogen and a carbon in there, plus some oxygens. Then you also need to know carbonate. This doesn't have the hydrogen and has a slightly different charge. It's going to be 2 negative instead of 1 negative. Dichromate and chromate. In chemistry, di means 2, so this one has 2 chromiums with it. Sulfate, sulfite, again both with sulfur, just differing in the number of oxygens there. And then phosphate is our last one that you have to memorize. So I eliminated a few, what I would like for you to do is to go ahead and make flashcards for these, and I'll show you how I want those done. When you're making the flashcards for these, I'd like for you to put the name on one side. So this time I'm working with nitrate right here. Put the name on one side, and I took the time and I underlined the A because the only difference between nitrate and nitrite, at least in how you spell it, is an A or an I. We will begin to have quizzes on these to make sure that you are working on memorizing them. I must be able to tell an 8 from an ite when you write it. So it's best just to go ahead and write your flashcards that way. On the other side, I want you to write the symbol. Now, normally when I read the symbols out, I'll read them as NO3, and I'll read the subscript first, and then I will read the superscript. Now, it matters the placement of these subscripts and superscripts. When you write them on your flashcards, make sure that you reflect that and make sure it is a superscript or a subscript. Also, capital letters matter. Here, this is a lowercase n. It needs to remain a lowercase n in permanganate. Otherwise, we think it's nitrogen. So NO3 negative is nitrate, and you can start quizzing yourself on these polyatomic ions. With something like acetate, where I had both of them, another one would be hydronium. You can write the name on one side, we have acetate, and then you can just put both of those on the same flashcard. You only have to remember one, but you got to recognize both, and that'll help you do that by having them on the same flashcard. And again, I would read this one as C2H3O2 negative. One thing I would like to point out is the difference maybe between an 8 and an ite. Now, they don't always have the same number of oxygens, but an 8 always has one more oxygen than an ite. That's true here. If we look at chlorate and chlorite, it has the 8 version has one more oxygen than the ite version. Here we are with some different numbers, but still the same principle. Sulfate has 4 oxygens and sulfite has 3 oxygens. So that can help you out a little bit with memorizing these, but go ahead and get a good start over the weekend, and we'll start having quizzes next week. So study well.